The 1920s was a decade of innovation, dance, music, fashion, excitement, and joy. But it was also a difficult time full of sickness, strife, and the Prohibition. All of this while the world recovered from the Great War. It certainly has its similarities to today. I'll be your host, and while I'm no historian, I'm certainly interested in learning more about the world 1 century ago. So I'll be covering the 20s week by week as we progress through the 20s. I'd like you to join me for this study and hopefully learn something new here on the 20s in the 20s. We start off week 2 with some drama in Russia, as Imperial Russian Navy Admiral Alexander Kolchak, who was recognized by the Allied powers as supreme leader of Russia, resigned his post and transferred his authority as commander of the White Army over to Grigory Semyonov. He then departed Krasnoyarsk ahead of the arrival of the Bolsheviks of the Red Army, traveling on a train to Irkutsk, where he had been promised safe passage to the west under Allied protection. Members of the Whites, formerly under the command of Admiral Kolchak, surrendered at Krasnoyarsk. The defeated rebels were then forced by the Bolshevik government to march to exile in Siberia, known as the Great Siberian Ice March, a 2,000-kilometer winter retreat from Omsk to Chita, in exposed conditions reaching down to negative 40 degrees. Back in America, on a more positive note, the first black baseball league, National Negro Baseball League, organizes. And in other baseball news, Babe Ruth of the Boston Red Sox, the most famous player in Major League Baseball arguably in history, and the American League's home run leader in 1919, was sent to the New York Yankees after Red Sox owner Harry Frazee was paid a sum of at least $100,000, equivalent to about $1.3 million in current day, for the rights to Ruth's contract. Frazee, who was already struggling financially from his purchase of the Red Sox, balked at paying Ruth's salary demand of $20,000 for the 1920 baseball season. As we will see in coming years, maybe he should have just paid the salary, but he had some theatrical interests to fund. This all occurred towards the beginning of the 86-year period in which the Red Sox did not win a single World Series. Many believe the selling of Ruth was the cause of this drought, a superstition known as the Curse of the Bambino. Back in the East, Prince Faisal bin Hussein al-Hashemi of Syria and Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau of France agreed privately in Paris that France would recognize limited autonomy for Syria under a League of Nations mandate, with Faisal as the King of Syria responsible for the nation's internal affairs. France had declared a mandate over Syria following the fall of the Ottoman Empire, citing the Sykes-Picot Agreement as their legitimacy. And jumping right back to America, Kentucky and Rhode Island both on the same day ratified the proposed 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which gave women the right to vote. Each did so as their first order of business in the opening of their 1920 sessions. In Kentucky, the measure was passed 72 to 25 in the House and 30 to 8 in the Senate, while the vote in Rhode Island was unanimous in the Senate and 80 to 3 in the House. In doing so, they became the 23rd and 24th of the 48 states to ratify, with 36 needed for the process to be completed. Oregon, Indiana, and Wyoming ratified later in January, with South Carolina rejecting the amendment in the same month. Each of the original ratifying states were overlaid with the purple, white, and gold suffrage flag, indicating them as one of the original 35 states that ratified the 19th Amendment. The New York State Assembly voted to bar 5 recently elected members of the Socialist Party of America from being seated, in spite of their election to office. After the members voted 140 to 6 to make an inquiry into whether the Socialists could be loyal to their oaths, the 5 men were informed that they would have to prove their loyalty to the satisfaction of a tribunal of the Assembly. All 5 would eventually be expelled from the Assembly without being allowed to take office. Sounds like the 20s are just a popular time for those darn unreliable socialists of America. Huh. The Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, predecessor to the United Steelworkers of America Union, called an end to a strike that had started on September 22nd, which involved 367,000 workers at steel mills and furnaces. The association's governing national committee announced the decision after an all-day meeting in Pittsburgh. William Z. Foster, the Social Party organizer who served as the union's secretary-treasurer, resigned, and in 1923 he would join the Communist Party of America, eventually becoming the Communist nominee in 3 U.S. presidential elections. 6 Democratic Party candidates seeking the nomination to succeed Woodrow Wilson as U.S. President in the 1920 election spoke at the annual Jackson Day dinner in Washington. One of the frontrunners, 3-time failed nominee William Jennings Bryan, announced his opposition to the plan by Wilson to have the United States join the League of Nations. We will be hearing quite a bit about the League of Nations, as it was the first major international coalition against major conflict across the globe, and was a pretty hot topic in the 20s. You'll see why shortly. On January 10th, the Treaty of Versailles went into effect as the most important peace treaty to bring World War I to an end. Germany and 14 of the 17 Allied powers exchanged instruments of ratification, ending the state of war between Germany and said Allied powers. Among other things, this treaty required Germany to pay reparations of about 132 billion marks, or 442 billion US dollars in today's current value. The deservedness of these reparations has been a subject of long debate ever since. The United States, China, Greece, and Romania had not ratified the treaty. For the US specifically, by a vote of 39 to 55, the Senate denied consent to the Treaty of Versailles. A coalition of senators known as the Irreconcilables led to the ultimate downfall of the treaty in the US government. The United States never ratified the Treaty of Versailles, nor did it join the resultant League of Nations. In 1921, however, Congress approved resolutions formally ending hostilities with Germany and the Austro-Hungarian government. Speaking of which, the League of Nations Covenant entered into force on the same day, January 10th. In more domestic drama, by a vote of 328 to 6, the U.S. House of Representatives refused to allow Victor Berger, who had been elected in November as a Socialist Party candidate in Wisconsin, to be sworn into office. The vote was premised on the idea that, as a socialist, Berger was disloyal to the United States. Berger previously was denied a seat on November 10th by a vote of 311 to 1, so at least he got a couple more yeses this time. Setting a National Hockey League record that still stands, the Montreal Canadiens defeated the Toronto St. Patricks, who are now known as the Toronto Maple Leafs, 14 goals to 7. The 21 goals scored that day set an NHL record for most combined goals in a game, and would be tied on December 11, 1985, with the Edmonton Oilers' 12-9 defeat of the Chicago Blackhawks. And that's it for another week of the 20s in the 20s. As I come off of holiday vacation, I'm still getting this channel up to speed. I'm currently running on a short schedule, but should be able to improve the production value in the coming weeks with more free time. As I've said, I'm no historian, so I'm learning along with you guys. If you have any ideas, suggestions, or resources to share, feel free to leave them in the comments or get in contact with me on Twitter. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.